Just one more minute to let folks join. Well, yes, thank you everyone for joining our Lunch and Learn to learn about Prop 4, the climate bond. Go ahead and keep adding your name, your pronouns, where you're zooming in from, uh, and the ancestral land in which you're on. My name is Becca Estrada. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Southern California director with CIPL. I am joining from Pasadena, California on the native Tongva lands. But today I would like to share a land acknowledgement for Oakland, California, where our main office is. So, California Interfaith Power and Light's headquarters are located in Oakland, California, the unceded ancestral home of the Choncheño-speaking Oleno people. They steward the East Bay lands and waters sustainably for nearly 1,000 years before colonization. The Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers for this place. So before we get started, I just want to share some quick announcements. California Interfaith Power and Light, we are doing our share to promote electric vehicles. So if you are in my neck of the woods in Southern California, Edison territory, and you would like to share about the good news of electric vehicles and how they are becoming more and more affordable, please send me an email. I will pop my email address into the chat. And yeah, I'd be excited to partner with you and either table or share a presentation about EVs. And Gregory, would you like to share an announcement?
Yes, I'm going to throw my email in the chat. Y'all, I would love to come to your congregation and talk about climate justice, about getting out the vote, about Prop 4, about EVs, about transitioning to cleaner homes and equipment. We can organize your youth group into being the next rising stars at our lobby day, an idea I stole from our Southern California director, Becca. Anything and everything is on the table, but I want to be there and I want to support you. I happen to have a grant right now with San Mateo County, so not just San Mateo City, but the county. If you want to do something on EVs or really anything about climate justice, I have a little extra money to fund the project, to fund an event, or to do something like that. So please, please do reach out, get creative, and know that you can do the same with Becca down in Southern California. But we want to work with you. We want to partner with you. We want to uplift climate justice. And we are in the heat of an election cycle. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. And we want to be there and support you. So thank you.
Thank you, Gregory, and thank you, Becca. Hi, everybody. This is Susan Stevenson, CIPL Executive Director. I'm coming to you from Oakland, California, where it's actually lovely weather at the moment. I hope everybody's managing to stay cool, though, in this incredible heat wave we've been having all over the state. Just another of the climate impacts we are experiencing. And today is the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, a New Year of creation. So Shana Tova to all of you who are celebrating. And it's also St. Francis Day. And St. Francis, of course, is the patron saint of animals and creation for many Christians. So before we break bread together, we will have a special prayer in honor of creation by the Reverend Canon Sally Bingham, who has joined us today and I believe is just about ready to give us a blessing. And Sally, as many of you may know, is the founder of California Interfaith Power and Light and also a priest with Grace Cathedral in the city of St. Francis in San Francisco. So Sally. Would
Thank
you
you,
share
Susan, and hello, everybody. It's nice of you to be on this. You're probably sitting indoors as I am, and it's beautiful, beautiful weather and unusually warm in San Francisco. So we're all pretty happy here, and I hope you're happy wherever you are. I'm delighted to do this little opening prayer for you. I am um, as you all know, I am an Episcopal priest. I know very little about Rosh Hashanah, but I think I know a substantial amount about God, who created everything, all flora and fauna and animals and creatures and everything that we know that lives, including trees and water. And none of that had any denomination attached to it. God loves everyone and everything, and um, nothing would be excluded. No people. In fact, St. Francis himself spent a lot of time getting to know the Muslim people, and that's if you study St. Francis, you find out that he was very interfaith. His prayer, which is in the Book of Common Prayer, is been a little bit jilted to be all Christian. But when I read it to you, you'll realize that there's no preference for any particular denomination. This is an interfaith prayer. So let us pray. God, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And I also would like to share a blessing. If anybody has a dog or a cat at their feet, put it up for all of us to see, and let's bless those creatures. I've got one right here. Let me get her up. This is Stevie. And if you all have animals, just assume that the blessing that I'm going to do on her is also for you and your animals. Gracious God, we give you thanks for our pets and the unconditional love that they give to us. Keep them safe and keep them healthy, and help us understand their needs and understand their wants and how to take really good care of them, because they give us so much pleasure. Amen. And that concludes what I have to say, Susan.
Amen. Thank you, Sally.
You're
And I think that if anybody's in San Francisco, I think you and others at Grace Cathedral are blessing the animals this Sunday.
This Sunday at 8:30 and again at 11 in the courtyard. And one year we had the San Francisco police, the mounted police. I don't think they're coming this year, but we get all kinds of animals. We had a really great pig last year.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks everybody again for being here. We've got a great turnout today to hear about Prop 4. And we have a very special guest who is going to share with us about Prop 4 shortly. And that is Katelyn Roedner Sutter. Katelyn is a longtime leader of California Interfaith Power and Light, now on our board of directors. And she's also the California director of EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund. She and others from EDF have been pushing the governor and legislature to put a climate bond on the ballot for a couple of years now. So she's going to tell us about some of the key elements of this bond, why it can be so impactful as we deal with climate change and the impacts of climate change, and try to help make our communities more resilient and move, of course, rapidly to clean energy. And then we'll have time for Q&A and discussion at the end. In the meantime, though, if a question comes up while Katelyn is talking, feel free to put it in the chat. And we should be wrapping up right about 12:45. So quick webinar today. But Katelyn, thank you for joining us and welcome. And we look forward to your presentation. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's great to be here. I appreciate you inviting me to do this, and it's wonderful to see Sally and Louise and other longtime friends on here. So thanks for the invitation. Becca, would you mind going to the next slide, please? Thanks. Perfect. So yes, I am here to talk about Proposition 4, which is on your ballot that I have already received my ballot. It is sitting on my dining room table. Some of you may have already received yours as well, but if not, you will shortly. Proposition 4 is a $10 billion climate bond. Environmental Defense Fund, along with many other organizations, have been working for almost 5 years at this point to get this through the state legislature and signed by the governor so it can go on a ballot so California voters can vote on it. 2024 turned out to be the year, and that coalition grew to be over 180 organizations across, some traditional environmental groups like EDF, some more conservation-focused groups, a lot of environmental justice and equity groups, sustainable ag, clean energy developers even. Like, we had a really big and broad coalition behind this bond. Really unprecedented, and especially the focus on environmental justice and equity and what actually went into this bond. 40% of that $10 billion is earmarked to go to low-income communities and communities of color. And that kind of focus on the most underserved communities in California, I think I've said unprecedented at least once already, but really is a really new thing for a natural resources bond in California. And so it's really exciting to see this bond address so many of the issues across our state and across all communities in our state. I think the perfect. Thank you, Becca. I was going there and you read my mind. And I realized after I sent you this slide that we actually have even more up-to-date polling results than what is on here. But the good news is this says that 59% of likely voters in California support Proposition 4. Polling that just came out last week says that it is up to 65%. So the image doesn't quite match the bullet points there, but the point is there is significant support across likely voters across the entire state for this bond. We have seen support grow consistently ever since, it was originally polled back before the legislature had even passed it. And so that's really encouraging to see that voters in all corners of California see benefit in this bond and really support the passage of this bond. And I think that's because people across the state are feeling the impacts of climate change right now. So I live in Lodi, where, we have real serious extreme heat days. We have air quality issues. We also have a really proud agricultural heritage, and there are resources in here, and I'll talk more about what's actually in the bond in a minute, but there's also money in here to support sustainable agriculture. So I can see from my little corner of California in Lodi that there are resources here to benefit my community and communities like mine. We'll talk about some of the other things in the bond in just a moment, but I think it's clear that people across our state, whether it's extreme heat or sea level rise or wildfire, are really feeling the impacts of climate change right now, and that is leading them to support Proposition 4, which is good news. Next slide, please, Becca. So some of the major headlines of what is in Proposition 4 is really focused on the prevention of wildfire, ensuring safe drinking water for Californians, and making California more resilient to natural disasters. So for wildfires, this is things like more revenue or more resources to create fire breaks. So we are, protecting communities from fire, reducing fuel so wildfires are less intense. There is a program creatively called the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Program that has funding in the bond that helps to upgrade local water systems, especially in parts of southern San Joaquin Valley where there's real serious issues with having a consistent, clean supply of drinking water. And then a lot of investment in protecting California and both our natural resources, but also communities. So addressing issues like extreme heat, and making sure that our wild spaces are more resilient to climate change as well. I think the next slide, please, Becca. Excellent. So here's some more detail on what is actually in the bond. And I know there's a lot of text here, so I'll give you a minute to take a look at this. We see, I mentioned the sort of unprecedented focus on equity and environmental justice. We see that especially show up in that $3.8 billion for safe drinking water. That helps to, like I said, upgrade some local systems, clean drinking water, so we're removing some of the pollution that winds up in drinking water. And then the other piece we see a lot of EJ focus is in that $450 million for extreme heat. So this could be planting more trees, so there's more of an urban tree canopy to reduce ambient temperatures in urban communities. But also, I saw something in the chat earlier about cooling centers. I mean, there are resources in this bond to help develop more community cooling centers when we do have those really extreme heat days. Because we blessed the animals at the top of this call, and it is today is the celebration of St. Francis. A couple I will point out to you, there is $100 million in this bond for salmon restoration. So I don't know if any of you have recently seen the news about the dams being removed up on the Klamath River in far northern California. That's in partnership with the Yurok tribe, which is the largest tribe in California. And this is part of their ancestral land, and they have been fighting to have these dams removed. Oh my gosh, at least a decade, if not longer. And so there are resources in the bond to help with further, dam removal or other strategies to restore salmon. And in the specific case of the Yurok, salmon are a really important part of their culture and their faith tradition. So in honor of the animals, there is one investment in not only an equity outcome, but also animals. There's also $870 million for land and habitat conservation. California is part of a program called 30 by 30, which requires the state, or encourages the state, I should say, to conserve 30% of our land and water by 2030. Obviously, that takes a lot of resources to do that, but that is really vital habitat for a lot of the special species that we have in California. And there are resources in this bond to help do that. So to connect it back to today's celebration, I wanted to share just a couple of those specific examples for you. I think the last thing I'll say on this slide is that I think what you see here is a recognition that California is a really big and really diverse state. And different parts of the state experience climate change a little bit differently. And communities across the state have different needs to be more resilient to climate change and also to, preserve their health and welfare and their special natural spaces. So that's why you see such an array of issues addressed in here, because California has a lot of different needs because we're big and diverse. Next, thank you. This is a really small sample of all of the groups that have endorsed Proposition 4, but you will see California Interfaith Power and Light on that list. There is a very lengthy and comprehensive list on the website. But this is a sampling just to show that, there is support from the environmental community, EJ and public health advocates, labor, Interfaith Power and Light. So it's a big tent coalition here in support of Proposition 4. And I think next slide, perfect. So these are a few ways that you can get involved. There's the website is there, and you can see all of the endorsements that I just mentioned. There are weekly action alerts that the campaign sends out if you want to be more involved in supporting Proposition 4. There's also a really good social media toolkit on the website. If you are active on any of the social media platforms, there's some great content that you can just like download and use for yourself. You can also make your own content, and the best way to do that is to reflect on why you personally would support Proposition 4. Is it you are concerned about, extreme heat in your neighborhood? Are you concerned about, people having access to safe, clean drinking water? Whatever it is that motivates you, that personal story is really impactful. And you can share that on social media with the handle for the campaign is there. There is also a section that talks about sort of what I've gone through here, like why vote yes. And there's a lot of content there if you're not sure where to begin in terms of talking about supporting Proposition 4. And I guess the last thing I'd say is those personal stories are also really great material for letters to the editor. And that is a great way that folks can be involved as well and support Proposition 4. So yeah, I think those are all of my slides. That was a pretty quick presentation, but would really welcome folks' questions or any discussion or anything like that. So.
Thank you, Katelyn, for that great overview. And it's really good to know that the polling has improved, and it's almost 2/3 support now?
Yeah, we're at 65%. So I think that's really impressive.
And even though sometimes bonds have to get 2/3, this one only needs a majority to pass, right?
That is correct. It passed the legislature with 2/3 vote in each chamber. I am not a lawyer here, but initiatives like this that go through the legislature only need a majority vote, whereas a citizens initiative is different. So this came from the legislature. So.
Okay, so that's why it only needs the majority, the 51%, basically. Awesome. I see that somebody had a question, which I was also wondering about. Who is against this? And are there any negatives that we should be aware of?
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, the opposition is exactly who you might expect it to be, folks that don't want the state spending more money. I suspect there's a little bit of, people who just don't believe that climate change is as big of a threat as it is, but luckily that's a pretty small amount of people in California. I think the biggest criticism I have heard is that this is a little bit of a scattershot approach, that, we're funding dozens and dozens and dozens of different initiatives within this bond. It's not focused. And I understand that. I hear that criticism. But I do think this approach is a reflection of just how big and diverse California is, and what San Joaquin Valley needs is different than what is needed in the Bay Area, is different than what is needed in the Yurok territory far north, or Sierra Nevada, or down along the southern border. So that's why we see so many different issues addressed in the bond. But that's probably the most specific criticism that I've heard, is this is kind of all over the place.
Okay, thank you. And climate change is all over the place, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It pretty much affects every aspect.
For sure.
Gregory, I think Gregory might have been looking at the chat more carefully. Is there anything else that's rising up that people are asking? Or also, I think people can, if you would like to ask a question using your voice, we can unmute you. So you can use the reactions button to raise your hand. When we call on you.
Yeah, let me unmute Dick Motika.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like I have to ask to unmute, and you might have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. What's the mechanism by which a local community that has a need is able to access? In other words, how are these funds administered? $10 billion pot of money.
Yeah. So within the legislation that created the bond, it is spelled out how many, how much for, that salmon restoration I talked about, the dollar amount for safe and affordable drinking water. So it's all within the bill, sort of what the various pots of money are. And then those pots of money are administered by the relevant state agency. So whether that is the State Water Resources Control Board or the Department of Natural Resources. So for a local community, it would be a little bit less accessing bond dollars as identifying which program you want to participate in, that there would be money available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Evan, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and it should prompt you. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question was, how much of the 40, how does the 40% for environmental justice communities and people of color and low income, how is that 40% distributed among the categories? What gave me the idea to ask this question is the extreme heat, for instance. Those expenditures may be primarily on environmental justice communities, but that's only about 5% of the total, not 40%. So, where is the community environmental justice part going?
Yeah, it's identified by program. So you're correct that it is largely the extreme heat category. There's funding for parks in communities that don't have a lot of parks. So that's something that would be tagged as an environmental justice investment. Again, the safe and affordable drinking water would also be tagged as an investment. So it's sort of looking at the list of things that are funded and identifying which categories benefit environmental justice communities. That is different than how sometimes the state does it, where they say 40% of everything has to go to, or 35%, as the case may be, has to go to EJ communities. This is on a program by program basis. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, if that makes sense, but something like I'm trying to think of one that wouldn't obviously benefit disadvantaged communities at the moment, but there's some, say there's a program on healthy soils, and there's a little bit of money in this bond for the healthy soils program. That would not be tagged as an EJ program, but like I said, something like the extreme heat programs, safe and affordable drinking water, those would be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see Diane had a question. I just put a link in the chat, but if you have an event coming up, Diane, and wanted to know anything you could do, any short-term available resources, we have a pretty short, small flyer that you could print out just on a regular printer and cut it into 3 pieces, and then you could distribute those at your event, at your congregation. It's just Yes, I'm Prop 4 and has our California IPL logo. If anybody wants to have their logo be co-branded with your organization, let us know. We can add that. but that's a resource that we have available right now, if you would like something to share with your community. And I think it'll be great to just, make sure people know this is on the ballot. I mean, it's good to know that when people hear it and hear what it is, 65% of them say yes, they're in favor of that. But we still need people to read all the way down the ballot and actually vote.
Yeah.
So increasing awareness, I think, is good.
There is also a fact sheet on the Yes on Prop 4 website that you can download and print. I think it's also sort of a 2-page full color, but it talks a lot about the different investments if that's something that's helpful.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
Oh, that.
It becomes a PDF when you click on it, but I'll put it in the chat. That might also be a useful thing for you.
And then we did have a raised hand. Is it Michael?
It's Michal.
Michal.
And what you just said, Katelyn, might answer my question. And that is, I'm from Dino, Jews called the Climate Action Northern California chapter. And we've had trouble finding IRA, where all the IRA money is going. So I'm wondering, is that going to be a problem with Prop 4 too? How will we know what monies are going to what agencies for what purposes?
It's a good question. And I will say I share some of the challenges in tracking IRA dollars because it gets so complicated so quickly. There is a requirement in the enacting legislation to have annual independent audits of where the bond dollars are going. The legislature also has to appropriate the funds as part of the budget every year. So that is, not necessarily the most transparent process, but it is a public process. And then I know there's the requirement of the audit, and I cannot honestly off the top of my head recall if there's anything else specified in the legislation other than having that annual audit of where the dollars are going.
Well, that's something. So thank you.
It's a step in the right direction, but I agree with you. There's always a need for more transparency on where federal and state dollars go.
Wow.
Yeah, this has been a great discussion. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have another question for Katelyn. Oh, we have one in the chat. Are these restricted funds or can they be moved? How will the money be audited?
So they are restricted in the sense that, once the voters vote on this, the legislature can't just decide to spend the money on other things. They're not allowed to do that. But it does have to be appropriated through the budget process. So the idea is the Department of Finance will actually sell the bonds, and then the revenue is available to be appropriated according to what is laid out in the enacting legislation. How the money will be audited is a good question. There is a state auditor as well as the Department of Finance that has to. The Department of Finance does an analysis of every budget every year to make sure that it is complying with the law and give the legislature and the governor direction about, what commitments have previously been made and again, making sure they comply with the law. There's also a state auditor, and I don't know all the ways that the state auditor gets involved in things, but one way is the governor and the legislature can ask them to do an audit. So if there are folks in the legislature who feel that the Department of Natural Resources, just to pick on one, is not spending money the way that they think it should be under the bond, they can request an audit by the state auditor. And we have certainly seen that happen with other issues where the legislature has requested an audit over the implementation of environmental laws.
All right, I see Evan has a question. Feel free to unmute yourself, Evan.
Is there a place in the state audit office or in another agency who will be putting the money in the hands of particular agencies for particular projects? Is there one agency to look at to see what's happening other than the annual audit?
That would probably be this is getting into the functioning of government behind the scenes that I admit I don't know all of the details of, but I think that would be the role of the Department of Finance, because they're the ones, along with the treasurer, I guess, who will actually sell the bonds. And so they're the ones that say this is how much money is available to be appropriated in the budget every year, and say, these are the legal commitments that the state has made. So they're the ones that would do the estimate of this is how much money is available in any given year to be spent in accordance with the legislation.
Thank you.
Question. This might be another hard one, Katelyn, but do you imagine, when the money is distributed after it passes and the money starts going out, money for resilience, for resilient communities, is all of that pretty much going through cities and counties, or do you know if nonprofits, such as congregations or community organizations, would be able to apply for funding?
That is a good question, and it's going to depend on the specific program. So like there's $60 million for community resilience centers. I don't know all the details of that program, but certainly, that would have to be done at least in partnership with local communities and presumably congregations as well. Other programs, there's $150 million for the Transformative Climate Communities program, which I know a little bit more about that one, and that one certainly goes to benefit, goes through local NGOs and potentially even congregations as well. So it's going to be that's a program by program question. Who's eligible to get the money?
Okay, we'll work on figuring that out after it passes and share with all of you. Also, thanks to everybody who joined CIPL at our lobby day back in June, where we lobbied for this very initiative to be placed on the ballot. So it was a labor of, you said it was about 5 years, Katelyn, from when advocates first started asking for this to be put on the ballot. So it shows you how long these efforts take. And then, of course, passing it is only the first step. Then we need to make sure the funding gets out there. So we'll definitely be watchdogging that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it has really evolved over those 5 years. Traditionally, California has passed big natural resources bonds that support conservancies, which conservancies do incredible work. This is really the first time that we're seeing a bond focused on climate and natural resources that also deals with a lot of environmental justice priorities, whether it's about extreme heat or drinking water. And so that's what really makes this special and unique, is it's more than the traditional conservation that gets funded through bonds. It includes a lot of other state priorities as well, which is really exciting.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I hope that everybody will share information about Prop 4 with your congregation, with your communities. It is a great opportunity to be able to have voters state that they would like to see this investment in climate protection and resilience. So I hope we get a really great victory on this one. And you can help for sure by just handing out flyers. Let us know if you have any trouble with printing out those flyers, and especially if you're local to where our staff is, we can perhaps help get some already printed to you. Katelyn shared the link, and I've shared a link as well for the CIPL voter information page. There's also information on the Faith Votes campaign on our website where you can check your registration, make a plan to vote, research your ballot. So lots of good resources there at that link. Anything else, Becca or Gregory, to share before we let people go? Be in touch with them directly if you would like to help with EVs or EV promotion or the San Mateo County work Gregory talked about. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Katelyn, for this overview. Would you like to say anything to conclude, Katelyn?
I think just I really appreciate the interest in this group and all of the work that CIPL and all of you individually and with your congregations do to address climate change and uplift the communities most impacted by climate change. So just appreciation for all of you. And if there's anything else that comes up on Prop 4 that I can try to help answer or point you in the right direction, please feel free to be in touch.
Thank you so much. And thanks, everyone. Happy St. Francis Day. Shana Tova. And we'll see you next time.